Well, it's day 3 of being trapped in this closet, but I just found something.
Star Wars Imperial Assault is an adventure game for 5 or fewer players. It can also be played in skirmish mode, where there's no adventure, just shooting. I just finished playing the campaign that comes with the base game. It's written for 1 game master and 4 or fewer player characters. It was pretty fun. Imperial Assault has a simultaneously engaging, but also pretty straightforward and streamlined combat system. On a player's turn, they have 2 actions. They can use these actions to move around the board, activate things like doors and terminals, use special abilities, and of course, attack. When you attack, you roll the number of colored dice that corresponds to the weapon you're using. The numbers you roll must be equal to or greater than the distance between your figure and the target. Otherwise, the attack doesn't hit. These lightning bolts are called surges. When you roll a surge, you can spend it to activate cool effects, like adding more damage or stunning an enemy. It doesn't take very long to feel like you've really grasped the rules. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of this system. It's easy to learn. The surges keep it fresh because you feel like you're still making decisions rather than only rolling dice. When it comes to the dice, each color has different faces. So a yellow die is more likely to roll you surges, for example, while a red die rolls lots of hits. This is a great way to make each character and weapon feel a little bit different and unique in a meaningful way. There are also 2 different types of defense dice. This adds a little more character and personality to whoever's defending. The black die is more like straight up defense and blocking, but the white die is more like dodging and being sneaky. If you roll this X on the white die, it means that you evade the entire attack and nothing happens. There's also this really fun thing with the strain tokens. Your character can take on strain to do fancy main character moves. This adds another dimension to the strategy, and it's fun for storytelling. So each of the player characters has their character sheet and all their cool upgrades and special abilities. Meanwhile, the Imperial player just has a bunch of little minion cards. They work pretty much the same as the player characters, they're just weaker and don't use strain. Also, player characters can attack twice in one turn, but Imperial units may not. The campaign is structured as a series of scenarios that you play. Scenarios will either be a side quest or they'll advance the main storyline. The scenarios will be a little bit different depending on if the Empire or the Rebel players won the previous scenario. At the end of each scenario, all players, including the Imperial player, are rewarded. These rewards come in the form of experience points, and for the player characters, they get money, and the Imperial player, he gets influence. For most of the game, this leveling up aspect is actually really cool. It's fun that each character has their own unique upgrades they can unlock. However, by the end of the game, you're going to have a lot of little cards in front of you. These cards are pretty text heavy, and unfortunately there aren't really visual cues on them as to what they do. By the last few campaigns we were playing, the player characters kept forgetting about abilities that they had unlocked. It was just lost in the sea of text. It wasn't necessarily a huge problem, but I feel like that could have been more streamlined. The fact that at the end of every scenario, the player characters can buy new loot and gain XP to upgrade their personal stats seems a little bit excessive. So the Imperial player gets to spend influence on these sneaky little cards here. This allows the Imperial player to do some typical Dungeon Master stuff like deploy secret stormtroopers or ambush the players, etc. I found personally that these didn't really match up to the player abilities in terms of effectiveness. I would play my super sneaky evil card that lets me shoot first, and then it would just be the player's turn like normal, and they destroy me with their new blaster gun they just bought. Now in general, being the Imperial player was pretty interesting. I found that in the first few scenarios of the game, I was able to overwhelm the players pretty easily, and I defeated them a few times in a row. While this was fun, it kind of put a damper on the whole campaign, because now the players were just feeling bummed out. In the next few scenarios, I tried to let up just a little bit, and then they started winning. However, by mid-campaign, it was out of control, and I couldn't stop them even when I was trying. I would say for the majority of the game, the players won without too much difficulty. And that could definitely be my fault as the Imperial player, but also, it seems like most of the scenarios are structured in a way that the Rebel players have to complete an objective, like find information, or, kill this main character guy, or just survive a couple rounds. But the Imperial player has to kill each one of these superhero characters in order to win. Of course, that's not true all the time. That's just kind of the vibe. It didn't help that I caught on to more effective Imperial player strategies later in the game when it was kind of already too late. However, the finale scenario was appropriately difficult for the players, and we all had a really great time. There were some super movie-esque moments with main characters dying and evil villains showing up and people using their crazy special abilities they'd been saving all game, etc. Now, the box calls Imperial Assault a game of legendary Star Wars adventure, and I'd have to agree. It's an adventure game, and it's not necessarily a role-playing game. In fact, the way that side quests just are kind of thrown in there and completely derail the main quest really confuses the storyline. Granted, within a single scenario, there are some cool narrative beats where, okay, we got the door open, but oh no, reinforcement stormtroopers showed up. Come to think of it, that was what a lot of the story beats were, but it was still cool. Now granted, I was playing with some really fun people, so we were able to kind of weave in our own storytelling and play our own characters up a little bit. But obviously, the way the game's structured, no one really had any character development besides just getting stronger or getting a cooler gun. And that's fine, but this is an adventure game with only hints of a role-playing game. Something that I think is really interesting about the game is that it kind of invites you to play an RPG with it. Players have attributes that they can test, which in the real game aren't that meaningful, honestly, and it doesn't come up too much, but you could easily adapt these ideas to whatever campaign you've created. Just the fact that there are pre-made character cards and pre-made upgrades and cool items and a slew of enemies and a simple but super fun combat system suggests that you could use all of these elements for your own scenarios. Like, the main thing that we felt was missing was the character. Right? Some sort of fun guy at the marketplace you can interact with, or some crime lord you can do jobs for, etc. But that's something you, as a game master, could easily write in. I think with a little bit of thought, you could easily incorporate these components into the official Star Wars role-playing game. Not to mention, the modular map is super cool, and it immediately gets my wheels turning for how I could use it in a role-playing game. So overall, I would definitely say I'm a fan. I like Imperial Assault. It took me a couple months to play through the entire campaign because there are at least 11 scenarios that you have to play. However, I'm sure skirmish mode is a great option for just a one and done. I have to admit, after playing through, I am curious about the expansions, which add new map pieces, new enemies, new player characters, and of course their own campaigns. I am slightly more intrigued by the new components than the new campaigns though. Imperial Assault is considered a complete game, so all the expansions have been released. And so with that, it's not really a living game anymore, though there's still a big community of players. The point is, it's really easy to find a secondhand copy if you want to give it a try. Chances are you will walk away with inside jokes and funny, memorable moments that you and your friends will be talking about forever. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for more Jumble and Gaff board game reviews.